أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أأنتم أشد خلقا أم السماء بناها. So we completed around 3 different passages of Surah Al-Nazi'at, and the surah still has a few passages left. Right? We divide the surahs so that it's easier for us to understand. And the Mufassirun have divided in several ways as well. So the last passage had to do with the story of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam that was given to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in consolation to him and to guide him and the rest of his ummah to reflect back on that, and as a warning to the Quraysh that just as Allah Ta'ala dealt with leaders of the past, He will deal with you the same way. The leader who denied Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, Allah Ta'ala will deal with you in the same way. And so the last ayah which we had stopped at spoke about taking a lesson for those who fear Allah. And so that beautifully connects with the next part, which has to do then speaking about or being an intro to what's going to come after, which is discussion about the hereafter, right? The day of resurrection. And in Surah Naba, the same form of ayat came, in which Allah Ta'ala spoke about the grandness of His creation and how contemplating upon His creation should remind you of the hereafter, and it should remind you of Allah's endless creativity to continuously give death and then resurrect beings upon His wish, and that giving life and giving death and then resurrecting is all equal to Him and all the same to Him. So when He wants, He gives life. When He wants, He gives death. When He wants, He resurrects. And so Allah Ta'ala says, are you human beings, أَأَنْتُمْ أَشَدُّ خَلْقًا أَمِ السَّمَاءُ بَنَاهَا? Are you human beings a more strong creation than the heaven? أَأَنْتُمْ أَشَدُّ. Are you by your creation, خَلْقًا, by your creation, right, something more difficult, strong, grand than the sky? Anyone can look at the sky and look at, although the human being is a magnificent creation of Allah Ta'ala, but when you look at the sky, one is left in awe. The awe that one is left in is far more than when they look at a human being. Right? When they look at the strength it must have taken to raise the sky, right? Allah's strength to raise the sky. If you compare that to the human being, then you would realize that the human being isn't very strong. So, أَأَنْتُمْ أَشَدُّ خَلْقًا. Are you by your creation more strong and more difficult than the sky, banaha, that Allah Ta'ala has built? Sama generally refers to anything above you, right? So it comes from samu, and as-sama, although we'll call it the sky or the heaven, it refers to anything above the human being. Banaha, which Allah Ta'ala used the beautiful word bina, which is to build, right? The same word for any building. So Allah Ta'ala has seamlessly built and perfected this structure in front of you of the skies and the heavens. رَفَعَ سَمْكَهَا فَسَوَّاهَا. He raised its height and doubled it. Samk is the highest point of any building. So when you see a building, you recognize its height by its highest point. It's the top of it, right? The samk is also used for a camel, for example. So رَفَعَ سَمْكَهَا, Allah Ta'ala raised its highest point, right, which is beyond the vision of the eyes. فَسَوَّاهَا. And then taswiyah is used for the human being as well. It's used for any type of creation which Allah Ta'ala beautifies, He levels, He balances, and He perfects. وَأَغْطَشَ لَيْلَهَا وَأَخْرَجَ ضُحَاهَا. And He darkened its night and brought out its morning light. Right, the passing of Allah Ta'ala speaks about it as what? اختلاف الليل والنهار as well. That the passing of the night and the day, one after the other, the coming of darkness and then the coming of light, this is all a sign, right? This is all a sign of Allah Ta'ala, His existence and His system which He has put in place. And light and darkness in specific. Why? Because the human being has a great relationship with light and darkness. Light guides the human being. Darkness is, for the human being, it can misguide him. It can put him in loss. Right? A human being cannot see in the darkness. So وَأَغْطَشَ لَيْلَهَا. He darkened its night and brought out its morning light. وَأَخْرَجَ ضُحَاهَا. And the duha is the morning time. Right? Some of the mufassirun mentioned that Allah Ta'ala is referring to over here that in the midst of the darkness of the time in which the Prophet ﷺ was sent in, Allah Ta'ala took out the light of revelation. Allah Ta'ala took out the light of guidance. وَالْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ دَحَاهَا. And the earth after this He alone spread. بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ دَحَاهَا. He spread this earth, right? وَالْأَرْضَ. He spread this earth. He made it in this shape for what? أَخْرَجَ مِنْهَا مَاءَهَا وَمَرْعَاهَا. So that people could cultivate it. He brought out from it water and pasturage. Right? مَاءَهَا, its water. وَمَرْعَاهَا. Mar'a refers to every land which is used to graze. So the land which is used for the animals, that the animals graze upon, or that human beings will cultivate, they will harvest, they will grow plants on that land. وَالْجِبَالَ أَرْسَاهَا. And the mountains He alone anchored them. Arsa, it refers to anchor something. So when a boat drops anchor, right, the same word would be used. وَالْجِبَالَ أَرْسَاهَا. Meaning Allah Ta'ala has firmly placed these mountains, that it's not easy for the human being or any creation to just move the mountains, right? Allah Ta'ala has firmly placed them within the ground as pegs, right? This is the same word also used for when the Arabs would hit the pegs of the tent into the ground. So the same way Allah Ta'ala has created the mountains as pegs for the ground, for the earth. مَتَاعًا لَكُمْ وَلِأَنْعَامِكُمْ. Now Allah Ta'ala speaking, first Allah Ta'ala describes the creation in a very beautiful manner. Allah Ta'ala describes His creation, and each description is unique in its own way. And then Allah Ta'ala describes why it's the way it is and why Allah Ta'ala created it, how He created it. مَتَاعًا لَكُمْ. All as enjoyment. All as enjoyment for you and for your cattle for a time. مَتَاعًا لَكُمْ وَلِأَنْعَامِكُمْ. Now mata' is generally that which is for temporary use. It's for temporary use. It doesn't last forever. Right? So Allah Ta'ala is giving us a sign over here as well that this will not last forever. All of these blessings which Allah Ta'ala has given us, they have an ending, they have an end point. مَتَاعًا لَكُمْ. But they are for you and for your animals. Then after Allah Ta'ala speaks about just the same way Allah Ta'ala spoke about His creation in Surah An-Naba. Allah Ta'ala said in Surah An-Naba, speaking about, right? وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ لِبَاسًا وَجَعَلْنَا النَّهَارَ مَعَاشًا وَبَنَيْنَا فَوْقَكُمْ سَبْعًا شِدَادًا. Right? The same bina, the word bina was used, that Allah Ta'ala built the seven skies. After all of that, in Surah Naba, Allah Ta'ala spoke then about what? About resurrection. So the same thing over here, then Allah Ta'ala in the next coming passage, Allah Ta'ala says, فَإِذَا جَاءَتِ الطَّامَّةُ الْكُبْرَى. So the point of speaking about the creation isn't to only stop there, but to go on to what's its purpose. What was the purpose of this creation? Why did Allah Ta'ala create these things? Then why did Allah Ta'ala give you this enjoyment? Why did He give you these things to use, right? Why did Allah Ta'ala ever allow us to use the sky, use the earth, use the grazing lands, use the animals? Why? All for what? For the day we have to give account as a test. فَفَإِذَا جَاءَتِ الطَّامَّةُ الْكُبْرَى. Yet when the great calamity comes to pass, it shall be utterly overwhelming. إِذَا جَاءَت, right? Ja'a is a word that means to come. However, ata is also that when something comes, or other words can be used as well. But ja'at is when the matter is very great. So when a very great matter comes into place. At-tamma, right? At-tamma comes from the word tamma. It's when something fills to its brim. So when a well will fill, tammat al-bi'r, when a well will fill all the way to its top, when people will fill it, or so then when it's filled to the top, that would be considered tammat al-kubra. This is referring to the greatest, right? You have akbar, the same word we use in salah, Allahu Akbar. This is the feminine of that word, al-kubra. This day it's overwhelming, it's great. يَوْمَ يَتَذَكَّرُ الْإِنسَانُ مَا سَعَى. A day when man shall remember all for which he truly strove. يَوْمَ يَتَذَكَّرُ الْإِنسَانُ مَا سَعَى. Now, in the passages before, when Allah Ta'ala spoke about, right, the words are you have to pay attention to the words and they connect to each other. Allah Ta'ala, what did He say about Fir'aun? ثُمَّ أَدْبَرَ يَسْعَى. The word of sa'i was used, same word over here. ثُمَّ أَدْبَرَ يَسْعَى. He went and he started pacing back and forth, planning, thinking, executing his action, executing his plan. This is the day when the human being then, right, Fir'aun and others likewise will remember what they made effort towards, why they acted the way they acted, and what drove them behind their actions. يَوْمَ يَتَذَكَّرُ. And they'll remember it vividly, they will remember it clearly. They won't forget anything about it. Every action they did, good or bad, they'll remember why they did it, how they did it, and in what setting they did it. Allah Ta'ala will give them the power of reflection at that point. يَوْمَ يَتَذَكَّرُ. They will have strong reflection. It's the day of reflection. يَوْمَ يَتَذَكَّرُ, right? So, mudaf ilayh in the Arabic language is generally done between two nouns, right? When you have, right, in the Arabic language, you'll, for example, you want to say Fulan's book, his book, Kitabuhu, Kitabu Zaydin, Zayd's book. Over here, this is also mudaf ilayh, yawma, and then yatadhakkar, the word which is a fi'l as a verb, it would be a mudaf ilayh. And they explain in detail how that happens, but sometimes a verb, a noun can be mudaf, and it can be made mudaf to a fi'l, to a verb. So يَوْمَ يَتَذَكَّرُ, it's the day of when the human being will reflect, will remember everything from the past. What will he remember? مَا سَعَى. What did he strive for? What did he work for? وَبُرِّزَتِ الْجَحِيمُ لِمَنْ يَرَى. And hellfire shall be brought forth for all to see. Burrizat is a very strong word. Baraza means for something to come open and to become apparent and clear in front of everyone. Baraza is also used for when a lion or an animal will come forward. Baraz, right? وَبُرِّزَتْ. So Allah Ta'ala will make it extremely clear, the Jahim. Now, what is Jahim? Jahim is another word for Jahannam, but it's a very strong word. Jahim comes from Jahama. Jahama means when a lion pounces, or when a fire is so out of control and so big that it comes towards you. That fire comes towards you. So the Jahim, the Jahannam, Allah is describing it, that it will be as if it is like a lion hungry and it's coming towards these people. That is Jahim. Liman yara, for those who are seeing, for those who are looking. So this will be brought openly and clearly to them, in front of them. فَأَمَّا مَنْ طَغَى. And now, so before Allah Ta'ala spoke specifically about Fir'aun, now Allah Ta'ala speaking, right? And this is a warning to the Quraysh and then everyone after them, that in general, that anyone who will act anyone who will transgress against Allah. Fir'aun what? He transgressed against Allah. إِنَّهُ طَغَى, right? When Allah Ta'ala sent Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, He said, go to him, اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Go to Fir'aun, he has transgressed. So now Allah Ta'ala is making it general. You don't have to be necessarily Fir'aun. Anyone who acts like the Pharaoh, anyone who participates in the same action, then his conclusion will be the same. فَأَمَّا مَنْ طَغَى. Then the one who transgresses وَآثَرَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا, and prefers this life, prefers the life of the dunya, gives preference to the life of the dunya over besides it. وَآثَرَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. They prefer the dunya over the hereafter. They prefer the dunya over besides it. Then what is for them? فَإِنَّ الْجَحِيمَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. Then indeed the hellfire is the abode for him. Now ma'wa is generally it's a word used for a safe heaven, a place of safety. You go to this place to seek safety. Why is Allah Ta'ala saying that Jahannam and that Jahim is their place of safety? This is how rhetorically Allah Ta'ala will speak about Jahannam sometimes. For example, Allah Ta'ala will say, right, Bashir, give good tidings to the people, to the disbelievers of Jahannam. Right? Give them the good tidings. This is a form of rhetoric in which Allah Ta'ala is speaking about the intensity of His anger and the intensity of the punishment for these people. And Allah Ta'ala is, rhetorically Allah Ta'ala is belittling these people. فَإِنَّ الْجَحِيمَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. This is their place which they will, right? And the people of Jannah will naturally walk to Jannah and they'll gravitate, their nur will guide them to Jannah. The same way, the people of Jahannam and Jahim, right? Those people who transgressed, they will naturally gravitate towards the fire. The same way we gravitate to our house, towards the safe haven, those people will gravitate naturally and find their pathway to Jahannam. And then Allah Ta'ala says, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ. But as for the one who fears his Lord's presence, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ. As for the one who fears, right? Allah Ta'ala used the word khawf before as well. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ, the one who fears standing before Allah. Maqam refers to a standing place or a point of time. The one who fears when and where he will stand in front of Allah. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. And he guards, right? Now the translation, interestingly, he mentions over here, guards his soul against whim. The one who fears Allah's presence and guards his soul against whim. But Allah Ta'ala over here didn't say وَنَهَى نَفْسَهُ, his soul. Allah said وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ, the soul, right? And this is referring to, right, the nafs can be translated as soul, it can be translated as ego, it can be translated as many things depending on the context. Over here, the more appropriate word would be the ego, because we're referring to the nafs sufuli, the lower self, which is inclined to the dunya, which is inclined to desires, which is inclined towards perhaps disobeying Allah Ta'ala in fulfilling the desires of the self. So the person who he guards and he stops this self from overcoming himself. So Allah Ta'ala is speaking about this ego as it is its own entity. So each and every one of us, we have this drive, the drive of the nafs within ourselves. It pushes us to do certain things and have certain inclinations, right? So this nafs is like its own being, and this is true, right? That the nafs can sometimes become so strong that it overcomes the human being. It becomes like a serpent. This is what Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi rahimahullah speaks about it as well. The nafs as a serpent, right? There's a subject in our deen as well known as the ta'birul ahlam, which is interpretation of dreams. Right? When it comes to the interpretation of a serpent in a dream, the ulama, they mention that a serpent attacking a person, attacking you in your dream, this refers to, possibly the interpretation is, a person's nafs, a person's ego and their nafs is trying to overcome them and overwhelm them. It's trying to overcome them and overwhelm them. So the nafs, right, has this, it's like it's its own entity. And so Allah Ta'ala is not saying your nafs or his nafs, rather the nafs as its own entity. If you can overcome it and stop it from anil hawa, right? Hawa is whim. Now hawa, it has a long, just as nafs has a long discussion and a long description, hawa also has a long discussion and description of what is hawa. And ulama have described it in many different ways. But hawa is the influence to the nafs. So the aql, for example, it's another faculty within us. Nafs is another faculty, aql is another faculty within us. And aql is an instrument which is influenced by wisdom, by ilm, by knowledge. Nafs is an instrument influenced by hawa, by desire. And hawa is, right, the ulama, they beautifully would mention that the hawa, it's different from the aql. Why? Because the aql means thabat. Aql actually means, aqala means steadfastness, perseverance. Whereas hawa, right, hawa, it can either come from hawa, which is air, right? Air has no perseverance, has no steadfastness. There's no substance to it, right? It has no place. It's over here sometimes, it's over there, it's moving, the wind is moving, right? So hawa is that which it's always changing, right? And hawa also can come from hawiya, which means to fall. So hawa is that which influences the nafs and takes it lower and lower and lower. It causes the person to fall lower and lower and lower. So the hawa, it's a breeze of influence which influences the nafs. It influences the nafs, and just like that breeze, it comes and then it goes. It comes and then it goes. So Allah Ta'ala is saying that as for the person who fears, he remembers the hereafter, he has to give account. And so therefore, when remembering that he has to give account in front of Allah, he controls himself. فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. Then the garden of paradise is indeed the abode for him. So the same way, the abode and the natural place where the people of Jahannam will gravitate towards is the Jahim, is the fire. The people of Jannah will gravitate towards Jannah. And they will naturally make their way to this abode in this safe haven. And we stop over here, and there's a few ayat left, and these ayat are going to be its own passage, and inshallah we'll conclude with those ayat in the coming weeks. We ask Allah Ta'ala to grant us understanding of this and forgive us for our mistakes in trying to do so. Sadaqallahu al-azim, subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Inshallah.